My name is Harper Matthews. I'm 28, and tonight I'm standing frozen in the middle of my stepmother Elaine's charity gala as security approaches to escort me out. "You're just a waitress," she laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. The cruel word stung, but what they didn't know was that my husband, the billionaire secretly funding this entire event, was about to walk through those doors. Years of their ridicule was about to come full circle in the most unexpected way. If you're curious about what happened next in this ballroom full of Boston's elite, stick around. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about family drama and sweet revenge. To understand why my stepmother would publicly humiliate me at her gala, we need to go back to the beginning. I was born to Thomas and Rachel Matthews, and for the first 8 years of my life, we were the picture-perfect family. Dad built his business from the ground up, creating a successful investment firm that catered to Boston's upper class. Mom was his rock, handling the social connections and charity work that came with Dad's growing success. She made sure I remained grounded despite our privileged lifestyle. Then when I was 8, my world shattered. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, and within 6 months she was gone. Dad was devastated. He threw himself into work, leaving me with a rotation of nannies who provided care but couldn't fill the enormous void Mom left behind. For 2 years, it was just Dad and me fumbling through life without her. Then Elaine Parker entered our lives at a charity function. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and seemed genuinely interested in both Dad and me. At least that's what I thought as a 10-year-old desperate for maternal affection. Within a year, they were married, and Elaine moved into our home with her daughter Madison, who happened to be exactly my age. I was initially excited to have a sister, but that excitement quickly faded. The changes were subtle at first. Madison got the slightly larger bedroom. She received more presents at Christmas. Her achievements were celebrated lavishly, while mine earned a cursory good job. But as months passed, the discrepancy in our treatment became impossible to ignore. "Harper, please use the other bathroom." "Madison needs her privacy," Elaine would say, relegating me to the guest bathroom while Madison enjoyed the one we were supposed to share. "Harper, Madison needs new riding boots for her lessons. We'll have to postpone getting you those art supplies." Somehow my needs always got postponed. The worst part was watching Dad slowly distance himself from me. He worked longer hours, took more business trips, and when he was home, Elaine expertly monopolized his attention. She'd schedule family activities when she knew I had other commitments, then paint me as the difficult child who didn't want to participate. "Thomas, I'm trying so hard with her, but she just won't let me in," I overheard her say one night, fake tears in her voice. My father, exhausted and emotionally drained, simply nodded and patted her hand. Through my teenage years, I threw myself into school and part-time jobs. While Madison enjoyed shopping sprees and European vacations, I worked at the local library and saved up for college. I didn't want to ask Dad for anything, because each request had to go through Elaine, who made me feel like a burden on the family finances, despite Dad's considerable wealth. There were rare moments, though, when Dad would break through the fog and really see me. He came to my high school art exhibition when Elaine and Madison conveniently had scheduling conflicts. He looked at my paintings with tears in his eyes. "You have your mother's talent," he whispered. And for that brief moment, I had my dad back. The summer after my freshman year of college, Dad had a massive heart attack in his office. By the time I rushed to the hospital, he was gone. I wasn't even given the chance to say goodbye. The funeral was a blur of faces and empty condolences. Elaine played the grieving widow perfectly while I sat in them with shock. It wasn't until the reading of the will that I understood how completely I'd been pushed out of my father's life. Dad left the bulk of his estate to Elaine. With Madison receiving substantial trust funds and real estate, I was left with just enough money to cover my remaining college tuition and a small inheritance that would barely fund a year of living expenses after graduation. "Your father wanted to make sure you learned the value of hard work," Elaine explained with false sympathy when I questioned the disparity. "Madison has different needs." The truth hit me hard. My father had either forgotten me or had been convinced. I didn't need his financial support. Either possibility was heartbreaking. After the will was settled, Elaine made it clear I wasn't welcome in the family home anymore. "You're an adult now, Harper. It's time you found your own place, she said coolly as I packed my childhood bedroom. Madison watched from the doorway, smirking. Don't worry about holiday dinners, Madison added. Our traditions are changing. Anyway, I was officially excommunicated from the Matthews family, keeping only my father's last name as proof. For the next few years, I had minimal contact with Elaine and Madison. They'd send a generic birthday card or Christmas greeting to maintain appearances to mutual acquaintances, but there were no phone calls, no invitations, no genuine interest in my life. I graduated with honors, found a job at a small but well-respected art gallery in Boston, and built a life for myself, determined to never again seek validation from people who saw me as disposable. Little did I know that life was about to take an unexpected turn that would eventually bring me face to face with the family that discarded me in circumstances none of us could have predicted. At 24, I had settled into my life at Westfield Gallery, a boutique art space in Boston that specialized in emerging artists. The pay wasn't spectacular, but I loved discovering new talent and helping artists navigate the intimidating art world. My tiny studio apartment in Cambridge was all mine, and I'd found a small circle of loyal friends who knew nothing about my family drama, exactly how I preferred it. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon in April when Nathan Reed walked into the gallery. The space was empty except for me cataloging a new shipment of sculptures. I didn't immediately recognize him, though in retrospect I should have. Nathan's tech company, Reed Innovations, had been making headlines for years, and at 32 he was already on Forbes' list of most influential entrepreneurs. But that day, he was just a tall, slightly rain-dampened man in a casual button-down shirt and jeans, looking intently at a collection of abstract paintings. "Can I help you find anything specific?" I asked, approaching him with my standard greeting. He turned and smiled, a genuine smile that reached his hazel eyes. "I'm just browsing, though I'm curious about this artist." He gestured to the paintings he'd been examining. "That's Lucia Mendez. She's relatively new, but her work on urban isolation is getting a lot of attention," I explained, falling easily into my element. The way she uses negative space to represent emotional voids in city life is particularly striking. We spent the next hour discussing art with me, showing him around the gallery and explaining the stories behind various pieces. What impressed me was his genuine interest. Nathan asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to my answers, unlike the typical wealthy collectors who often treated gallery staff as mere transaction facilitators. "You really know your artists," he commented as I wrapped up our impromptu tour. "I believe in what they're creating," I replied simply. "It's easy to be passionate about work that matters." He nodded thoughtfully. "I feel the same way about technology. When it's designed to solve real problems, not just make money, that's when it's worth investing in." As he was leaving, he handed me his business card. "I'm interested in supporting some of these artists. Could we continue this conversation over coffee sometime?" Only when I looked at the card did I realize who I'd been talking to. Nathan Reed, CEO and founder of Reed Innovations. I tried not to let my surprise show as I agreed to coffee later that week. Our coffee meeting turned into dinner when our conversation about art extended beyond the cafe's closing time. Nathan was refreshingly down-to-earth for someone of his status. He talked about growing up in a middle-class Seattle family. His parents, both teachers who emphasized education and creativity. They thought I was crazy when I dropped out of grad school to start my company, he admitted with a laugh. But they supported me anyway. Sent me care packages of homemade granola when I was living on ramen and working 20-hour days. I found myself sharing more than I intended to, telling him about my work, my apartment, my dreams of eventually opening my own gallery focused on therapeutic art programs for children. I carefully avoided any mention of my family situation, sticking to the present rather than my past. After that first dinner, we began seeing each other regularly. Nathan would stop by the gallery with lunch, or we'd meet after work to try new restaurants around the city. He never flaunted his wealth, often suggesting simple activities like walks along the Charles River or visits to small museum exhibitions. Money complicates things. He told me once when I asked why he lived in a modest townhouse rather than some extravagant mansion. "I've seen what happens to people when they start believing they're special because of their bank accounts. I don't want to be that person." Months into our relationship, I still hadn't told Nathan about my family. We were sitting on his rooftop terrace one evening when he gently broached the subject. You never talk about your family, he observed, his tone careful. I've told you all about my parents' terrible jokes and my sister's eco-area lifestyle, but I know nothing about yours. I stared at my glass of wine, debating how much to share. There's not much to tell. My mom died when I was 8. My dad remarried. Then he died too. My stepmother and I aren't close. Nathan didn't push, but his silence created a space that I unexpectedly wanted to fill. That night, I told him everything about Elaine's manipulation, Madison's cruelty, my father's emotional abandonment, and my eventual exclusion from the family. The hardest part isn't the money, I admitted. Tears finally breaking through my carefully constructed composure. It's knowing that my father died believing I didn't need him, that somehow I wasn't worth fighting for. Nathan listened without interruption, his hand steady around mine. When I finished, he didn't offer platitudes or express pity. Instead, he said, "They failed you, Harper, not the other way around." The simple statement broke something open inside me. For years, I'd carried the unspoken fear that perhaps I'd been unlovable, difficult, somehow deserving of being cast aside. Nathan's words began a healing process I hadn't realized I desperately needed. As our relationship deepened, Nathan never pressured me to reconnect with Elaine and Madison. He understood my need for distance and respected the boundaries I'd established. Instead, he introduced me to his own family. His warm, welcoming parents, who treated me like a daughter from our first meeting, and his sister Lily, who quickly became the sibling I'd always wanted. After a year together, Nathan proposed during a weekend trip to Provincetown. It wasn't an elaborate production, just the two of us walking on the beach at sunset when he stopped, took both my hands, and asked if I'd build a life with him. "I love you for your compassion, your resilience, and your ability to see beauty in places others overlook," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You've changed how I see the world, Harper. I want to face whatever comes next, with you beside me." We married 2 months later in a small ceremony at Nathan's parents' home in Seattle. It was intimate with only 30 guests, close friends, and Nathan's family. No one from my side attended because there was no one to invite. Elaine and Madison had no idea I was even in a relationship, let alone getting married to one of Boston's most eligible bachelors. It wasn't about shame or secrecy. It was about protection. The life I was building with Nathan was precious to me, untainted by the toxicity of my past. I had no desire to invite that negativity back into my world, even to showcase my happiness. After our honeymoon in Japan, we settled into married life in a new home in Brooklyn. I continued working at the gallery, insisting on making my own way professionally. Despite Nathan's wealth, he supported my independence, understanding that my career was about personal fulfillment, not financial necessity. For 2 years, we lived in a bubble of happiness that had nothing to do with Nathan's success or money. We traveled, worked on our respective passions, and began planning for children. Elaine and Madison remained firmly in my past where I intended them to stay. Then the invitation arrived. The cream-colored envelope with embossed gold lettering appeared in our mailbox on a Tuesday. I almost discarded it with the other formal invitations Nathan regularly received, but the return address caught my eye. The Matthews Family Foundation. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was an invitation to the annual Boston Children's Hospital Benefit Gala, hosted by Elaine Matthews. A handwritten note was paper-clipped to the invitation. "Harper, it's been too long. We should reconnect. The family misses you, Elaine." I stared at the flowing script, looking for signs of sincerity and finding none. In the 2 years since I'd married Nathan and the 6 years since my father's death, Elaine had made exactly 0 attempts to contact me. The family certainly hadn't missed me when I was struggling to pay rent during college or when I graduated, with no one in the audience to cheer for me. When Nathan came home that evening, I was still sitting at the kitchen island, the invitation laid out before me. "What's that?" he asked, kissing my cheek before noticing my expression. "Hey, what's wrong?" I pushed the invitation toward him. My stepmother has suddenly remembered my existence. Nathan read the invitation, his brow furrowing. "The Boston Children's Hospital benefit? That's..." He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. That's what I prompted, noticing his hesitation. He sat down beside me with a sigh. That's one of the events the Reed Foundation is sponsoring this year. We're the primary donor, actually. Wait, what? I felt like I'd missed something crucial. Your foundation is funding Ella's gala. Nathan ran a hand through his hair. I didn't. No, it was connected to your stepmother. The foundation staff handles most of the smaller partnerships, and I only review the major initiatives. The Children's Hospital is one we support annually, but I didn't realize who was chairing the event. Commit. In the weeks leading up to the gala, I vacillated between determination and anxiety. I selected a dress, a stunning midnight blue gown from an up-and-coming designer the gallery had connections with. It was elegant without being flashy, the kind of dress that communicated quiet confidence. The night before the event, lying in bed beside Nathan, my nerves resurfaced. What if this is a mistake? What if they humiliate me again? Nathan turned to face me, his expression serious. Listen to me, Harper. You're walking in there as my wife, as a successful professional, as a woman who built herself back up after everything they tore down. Nothing they say or do can change that. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. But if at any point you want to leave, just text me. I'll drop everything and come get you. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. His unwavering support studied me. Whatever happened tomorrow night, I wouldn't be facing it alone. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized something important. For the first time, I was approaching my family not from a place of need or longing, but from a position of strength. Whether they accepted me or not no longer determined my value. That alone felt like victory. The Rosewood Hotel ballroom glittered, with crystal chandeliers and elaborate floral arrangements when I arrived at 7 sharp. Attendants in crisp uniforms directed guests through the grand entrance where a photographer captured arrivals against a backdrop bearing the Matthews family foundation logo. I took a deep breath, smoothed my midnight blue gown, and approached the check-in table. Good evening, Harper Reed, I said to the young woman with the guest list. She scanned her tablet, then looked up with a smile. Yes, MC Reed. Welcome to the annual Boston Children's Hospital Benefit Gala. As I moved into the ballroom, I felt strangely calm. The space was already filled with Boston's elite in their finest attire. Old money families, successful entrepreneurs, politicians, and celebrities. I recognized many faces from the society pages Nathan occasionally appeared in. The first familiar face I encountered belonged to my father's cousin, Patricia, who was examining the silent auction items with her husband. Harper, she said, squinting at me in surprise. Harper Matthews? Is that you? It's Harper Reed now? I corrected gently. How are you, and Patricia? She looked me up and down with undisguised curiosity. Well, you've certainly grown up. We haven't seen you since. Goodness. Was it Thomas's funeral? What have you been doing with yourself? Before I could answer, her husband Gerald joined the conversation. Matthews? Oh, Ela's stepdaughter, right? Didn't know you were on the guest list this year. The subtle emphasis on this year made it clear I hadn't been included in previous events. Elaine kindly invited me, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I understand the foundation has been doing well. Patricia nodded distractedly, her attention already drifting toward more important guests arriving behind me. Yes, very well. Elaine has quite the touch for fundraising. You should say hello to her. She's over by the main table with Madison and the Aldridge family. I followed her gesture and spotted Elaine holding court near the center of the room. At 55, she remained striking, her blonde hair expertly colored and styled, her figure maintained through rigorous exercise and, I suspected, subtle cosmetic procedures. Beside her stood Madison, now 28 like me, but looking several years younger in a designer red dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my gallery salary. Taking another studying breath, I made my way toward them, collecting a champagne flute from a passing waiter for liquid courage. Madison saw me first. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline before she leaned to whisper something in Elaine's ear. My stepmother turned, her practiced social smile freezing momentarily before transforming into something that didn't reach her eyes. Harper. What a surprise, Elaine exclaimed, her voice carrying enough for nearby guests to hear. I wasn't sure you'd actually come, despite sending me an invitation with a personal note. The lie was so blatant I almost laughed. I wouldn't miss it, I replied instead. The Children's Hospital is such an important cause. Madison looked me over, with undisguised scrutiny. Interesting dress. Is that off the rack? It's actually from an emerging designer I work with at the gallery, I explained, refusing to be baited. Oh, you're still at that little art shop? Elaine asked with exaggerated surprise. How persistent of you. Before I could respond, an older gentleman in our circle, one of the hospital board members judging by his name tag, interjected, You work in the arts, young lady. Elaine answered before I could. Harper has always had creative aspirations. Nothing serious, of course. Actually, I countered, finding my voice. I'm the assistant director at Westfield Gallery now. We specialize in emerging artists and therapeutic art programs. The man looked interested, but Elaine smoothly redirected the conversation. Speaking of the hospital programs, Richard, you simply must hear about the new pediatric wing we're funding this year. I was effectively dismissed from the conversation. As I stepped back, Madison followed me. Seriously, Harper, why are you here? She asked, dropping all pretense of politeness now that we were out of earshot of the others. Nobody expected you to actually show up. Then why send the invitation? I challenged. Madison's smile was cold. Mom thought it would be the proper thing to do given the anniversary of your father's death next month. She didn't think you'd have the nerve to come alone. The casual mention of my father stung. I'm not alone. Actually, my husband will be joining me later. This caught Madison off guard. Husband? You're married? To whom? You'll meet him soon enough, I replied, unwilling to reveal Nathan's identity just yet. Before Madison could press further, we were interrupted by another relative. My father's brother William and his wife Susan. Is that little Harper? Uncle William boomed, clearly already enjoying the open bar. Good heavens, we thought you'd fallen off the face of the earth. Hello, Uncle William. Aunt Susan, I greeted them politely. Susan Eyre kissed near my cheek. Darling, where have you been? Hiding yourself? Elaine tells us she hardly hears from you these days. The revisionist history was breathtaking. Elaine had practically pushed me out the door after my father's death and had made zero effort to contact me in the years since. I've been focused on my career, I said simply. Life gets busy. What sort of career could possibly keep you from family? William asked with a dismissive wave. Family is everything in this world. The irony of his statement was apparently lost on him. As we spoke, I noticed more family members and old acquaintances glancing our way, whispering behind cocktail napkins. Elaine had rejoined Madison and was speaking intently to her while looking in my direction. Then Elaine did something unexpected. She approached the small stage where the band was playing and whispered to the lead musician. He nodded and stopped, mid-song. Ladies and gentlemen, Elaine's voice rang out over the sound system. I want to thank you all for coming tonight to support Boston Children's Hospital. Before dinner is served, I'd like to acknowledge all the wonderful staff who are making this evening possible. Our event planners, our caterers, and our serving staff. There was polite applause as Elaine gestured around the room. Then her gaze landed deliberately on me. In fact, I think there's been a bit of confusion. One of our waitstaff seems to have misplaced her uniform this evening. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the crowd as people turned to look at me. Harper, dear Elaine continued, her voice dripping with false concern. Did you get confused about your role tonight? I know you expressed interest in helping, but guests aren't supposed to arrive until 7, and the serving staff was asked to use the service entrance. My face burned as understanding dawned. This was why she'd invited me not to reconnect, but to publicly humiliate me. Madison stepped forward, camera phone already in hand. Mom, maybe Harper just wanted to see how the other half lives for one night. We should be flattered by her aspirations. More laughter, less uncomfortable now as the wealthy crowd relaxed into the familiar territory of mockery disguised as humor. Champagne glass clutched in my hand as Elaine continued her performance. Security, she called, gesturing to a man in a dark suit near the entrance. I believe we have someone who's confused about her place here tonight. Could you please assist her to the correct area, or perhaps just escort her out if she's not actually on staff. The security guard, looking uncomfortable but professional, began making his way toward me. My cousin Brandon, always eager to join in when someone was being targeted, called out from nearby. Always trying to be something you're not, a Harper. Some things never change. Others joined in, their voices overlapping. Did she actually think she belonged here? Always had delusions of grandeur. That one probably crashed the event hoping to network. The security guard reached me, his expression apologetic but firm. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to come with me." "There's been a mistake," I managed to say, my voice smaller than I intended. "I was invited. I have the invitation in my purse." Elaine approached us, Madison trailing behind her like an eager shadow. "The mistake was mine, Harper. I should have been clearer about boundaries. This event is for donors and hospital supporters. Not well, whatever it is you're doing these days." She turned to the security guard. "Please see her out. Gently, of course. She is family after all, technically speaking." Madison Opinel,